about the riots that took place in London when they initially tried to implement this calendar. And I'm going to be discussing a little bit about the debit credit card, the race war, IBM's decision to lay off tens of thousands of workers, the weather, UFO activity has increased. I'm going to talk about that. Military, and some of the areas and things in the military that I will be dealing with will be urban warfare as it relates to us in New York City. And things that you'll need to know to do, things you'll need to have, people that you will need to work with. And in a sense, I'm going to try to give you as much information as I possibly can in terms of how that you can take better care of yourself in the event hostilities break out between them versus us, truly. All right, let me go back to the calendar. As a Muslim, and those of us who are Hebrew Israelites, because I happen to be Bani Israel Muslim. My race is Bani Israel, Cherokee Blackfoots. And I'll come back to that later as far as history is concerned. Let's talk about this calendar real quick. The Islamic community that's in this country and throughout the world believe that what they call Friday is Friday. Well, I have sad news for you. Friday that you think is Friday is not. That is not the true day of Yom Al-Jum'ah. Now, why am I able to say this? Well, recently, I have this book, and in this book, it gives you parts of programs. And the title of the book is called Numerical Recipes in C. Now, what that book is designed to do is, it's like ready-made programs or parts of programs for people like myself who like to write programs. And, you know, if someone else has done most of the work for us or part of the work, we can take what they've done and incorporate that into what it is that we're doing. So, what am I saying? All I'm saying is, I wrote a program, or the shell of a program, which was designed to tell me when the new moons were going to be in for the month of Ramadan, month of Muharram, so on and so forth, as well as the Hebrew months. And after I incorporated part of the program from this book called Numerical Recipes, and for those of you who might not believe what I'm saying, you can go to McGraw-Hill on 6th Avenue and get this book. Or you can go to Barnes & Noble and just ask them for a book in Numerical Recipes in C. C is a programming language, just in case you don't know what C is. And I happened to notice that there was a part of the program which they labeled I, Greg. Now, what is that? Well, if you remember anything about Pope Gregory XIII, 1582, I, Greg is a calculation that was set forth by the Jesuit mathematician named Christopher Clavius from Germany, who, at the Pope's beckoning, hooked up the math for this calendar. And in the process, the Pope took 9 years for himself. Now, I'm going to define these things as we move on, as it relates to the calendar. So, prior to 1582, now listen up, Muslims and Hebrews who follow a lunar calendar, Friday used to be Friday. There was no finagling, there was no hanky-panky. None of that. And a funny thing happened after October 4th. And I went back and I printed this calendar. I ran the program two ways. First, I ran it using the Pope's calculations that he set forth, that today your watch has that algorithm in it. Most computers and various other things utilize this Pope Gregory's mathematical algorithm, which is actually lying to you in terms of what the day of the week is and what year you're actually in. While looking at the program, I ran the program two ways. I ran it using the Pope's calculation, and I ran it without using the Pope's calculation. And I found that with the little piece, the way they have this program hooked up, it's set this way. If the date is equal to October 15th, 1582, or greater than that date, such as you put in a date which you believe to be July 29th, 1993. When you input that into the computer, the program is designed in such a way that it immediately takes what you've put in. It reduces it to a pure number. It compares that pure number, to 15 times 10, and 10 represents the 10th month, 15 the 15th day, of course. 1582 is the year, right? Times some scaling factor. And that comes out to a big fat number. Now what it does is it looks to see if the date that you've put into the computer in a normal sense, July 29th, 1993. It takes all that information, how many days it is in a month. I forgot the 30 times 31. And with that, it multiplies all this out. And then in the computer program itself, it compares. And it sees, is this equal to or is it greater than? And if it is equal to or greater than this pure number that the Pope's number has, for his calculation has been reduced to, the program says, do not use the Julian Caesar calculations for determining the day, nor the year. Use Pope Gregory XIII's calculation. So, what is it that his calculation is doing? It's 3 lines in the program. He adds 11, and he subtracts 20. Now, y'all might not be familiar with that number in terms of what's going on here. What am I talking about? Why is he adding 11 and subtracting 20? Well, let's look at the 20. Let's take the easiest part first. The Earth completes a cycle roughly anywhere from 19 to every 20 years. And if those of you who are familiar with math know that when you graph a sine curve or function, which looks like a curve, on each peak, there's a number there, which represents something. Well, you can represent what it is that the Earth is doing the same way. So every 20 years, for example, the year that the Pope decided to change the calendar was in 1582. The Earth was just beginning a new 20-year cycle. And all of this is very mathematical. All right? It's been done since the day of Moses, prior to Moses, the ancient Egyptians, Ethiopians. All right? This is all purely mathematics here. So why not use an odd number? Well, an odd number might not work out so well. I mean, you know, you need your stuff to come out nice and neat. So the Earth, if you can read this in several different books, you can pick it up in Matrix 3, you can pick it up in some of the other books as far as ancient Egyptian science, as it related to the celestial bodies and what have you in the solar system. All right, and look at some of the ancient Hebrew Israelite literature, which is rightfully ours. Well, what the Pope did, why he added 11, was he had made a decree that what he was going to do was subtract 11 days from off of the calendar. Now listen very carefully now. On October 4th, 1582, October 4th was a Thursday, all right? And October 15th is on a Monday. Now listen to the days now. Thursday and Monday. Now the natural progression of days, as they follow one another, is after Thursday should be Friday, October the 5th, 1582. That is not what the Pope did. What the Pope did was, after adjusting the calendar, so to speak, by subtracting 11 days off, he could not continue to use the same calendar, which at that time was 1582. What you've got on your hands is a big mathematical mess. You cannot pluck one day or date off of some column, which is under either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. It doesn't matter how you try to do this, because what you're dealing with is complex mathematics here. You're dealing with linear algebra. And no matter how many the infinite possibilities is, anytime you try to move a number or entire column around, and when you look at a calendar, look very carefully. Every time you see a 4, which is signifying the 4th of some month, look below it and see below that on the same Monday what the next date is. And if you look at all of the calendars, you'll find that that's universal. So, you know, those of you out there whose minds is mathematically inclined, you should understand what I'm talking about. So anytime you try to move a column around, or one number changes the sign of that entire column, and still you're not guaranteed to get the achieved effect by pulling one number out of the column. So what am I talking about here? What I'm saying is this. The Pope decided to subtract 11 days off the calendar, and by decree, he declared the next day after October 4th, and remember October 4th is a Thursday, he declared it to be October 15th. So instead of saying Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, he said Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and so on. Now, if you go to some places in the Midwest, some high schools in the Midwest, like the all-white high schools, they'll let you know that the actual Sabbath day, or what they call the day of worship, what they call Sunday, is Wednesday. But yet, here in the city, or in the black community, or the community of color, they don't mention that in any of the high schools. They don't mention that in college. You know, unless you perhaps happen to be majoring in theology or something. Maybe you might get it that way. Maybe. And here it is. My thing is physics. And lots of mathematics I was required to take. And still, this never came up. So here it is. This book I had on my shelf for about over 5 years, and I've used it for other purposes. This time I'm sitting down and it says, I wish to print a lunar calendar showing me all the new moons and the dates that I can expect the new moons and the time that I can expect the new moon to show up. So I can compare it to some of the books in Islamic Hijran calendars that I already have in terms of when they say, based on a time zone, the new moon should show up. And in the course of all of this, this is what the Most High Power allows me to see. So back to this calendar. So why 11? Well, every day that you theoretically mess with the calendar, that equates to 1 year. So when he said he was going to subtract 11 days off the calendar, he was talking about 11 years. But it didn't work out where he actually subtracted 11 years. To compensate for it, he has to add 11. You can do the same simple experiment yourself. If you wish to modify this calendar and to throw people off, you can, you can deduct 10 days, 4 days, 3 days, whatever it might be. And just remember, that's going to equate to some years. So, for example, if this was really 1993 and you wanted to take off 10 days from this calendar, it's very simple. Now, follow what I'm about to say and you'll see how simple it is, because you do not need to be a math genius to do this. How is it that the Pope took 9 years for himself? Well, here's how simple it is. When he adds 11, 1582 plus 11 gives him some number. I think it's 1591 maybe. Or 1593. When he subtracts 20 from that, it told him the calendar that he needed to use that would allow him to get away with this mess that he just made was 1573. So theoretically, the closest thing that he came to climbing into a time machine and winding the clock back was just simply doing some add and subtract. It's simple. It's really simple. So instead of 1582, he said, okay, boys and girls, it is now 1573 again. Now, wait a minute, there's a problem here. In order for him to carry that over, if you go and dig up a 1573 calendar and look at it, pay close attention to October 15th. You will find that October 15th on a 1573 calendar shows up on Friday. So what he needs, so in order for him to make this pass over, all he's got to do is erase off the top of the calendar 1573 and pencil in 1582. And there you have it. So count the difference between 1582 and 1573, and you got a difference of 9 years. So you're going to see how important this 9 years is in a moment. And there's two ways you can do it right now. You can add 11 minus 20. All right? Now, those of you brothers who like to follow hadith, Prophet Muhammad said, if you see the unbelievers do something, you're to do the opposite. So in order to fix this mess with the calendar, you do the opposite of what his mathematician did. Instead of adding 11, you subtract 11. Instead of subtracting 20, you add 20. And if that's too hard to remember, just simply add 9. Because the difference between 1573 and 1582 is 9 years. Now, did I do this? Was there some proof that I used to substantiate this? Yes. I went to my computer and I sat down and I printed up 60 years worth of calendars, basically looking at the month of October, just to use as a reference point. So I went all the way back to 1940. Prior to that, I did look at 1582. I looked at 1581. I looked at 1573, and that's how I know the 1573 calendar actually showed October 15 when you run the Julian Caesar calculation, which is prior to Pope Gregory's calculation. It shows that October 15, 1573 was on a Friday. Okay? So, moving right along as it relates to the calendar. So, by setting it back 9 years, did it go over smoothly with the countries at that time? No. In London, riots broke out. Folks was fighting over that. They knew exactly what that meant. But in 1582, you got to remember, our people over here was enduring slavery. Those of us who are so-called Native Americans, okay, we were being roused from our homes, from our reservations. We were being killed, butchered, and murdered, all right, as well as the indigenous African people who came off the slave ships who came over here as well. We were all suffering over here together. So let alone, you know, I can see us having an excuse in terms of not knowing what happened with the sequence of days. Now let's just touch on this thing about how this hit big in the Islamic countries. Well, the Islamic Encyclopedia states, plain and simple, without mentioning Pope Gregory or what was done to the calculator, to the calendar. They don't even mention what happened to the calendar. But what they do say in the book is the Gregorian calendar is the predominant calendar that is used in all of the Islamic countries. The only time the Gregorian calendar does not play a vital role in anything is when they're using the Hijran calendar to say exactly what day from the new moon you can expect the Day of Atonement, which is in the month of Muharram, which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ kept, or Eid al-Adha, or any of the Eids, all right? Because those things, they can fall irrespective of what the day of the week is. So as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, according to the Islamic Encyclopedia, they use the Hijran calendar when it comes to the calculation of Islamic holy days. Other than that, they use the Gregorian calendar for everything else. So the Turks, they used to have a solar calendar, and the solar calendar that they had matched what the original Islamic calendar was. Which, what am I saying? Friday used to be Friday. Okay? This is all before 1582. And Sudan, they had a solar calendar. Throughout most of the Islamic countries, they had some sort of calendar that did not conflict in terms of what the day of the week was with respect to the Hijran calendar. So if I'm telling you that the Gregorian calendar is off by 9 years, so is the Hijran calendar. They said that this is 1414. I'm sorry, my brothers. It's not 1414. It's 1423. One of the things that we're going to have to come to grips with is we're going to have to leave these immigrants alone. They're over there doing their own thing. Now, there's a brother 2 years ago, and this is when I didn't realize that anything was wrong with the calendar yet. I had an idea. We heard conversations, folks talking about, hey, listen, this is not, then they said it was 1991. Hey, this is not 1991. I said, hey, well, I can go with that. But that didn't mean, I didn't know, I didn't have any means or vehicle or tools whereas I could be directed toward how do I correct this problem? How do I find out what day of the week it really is, let alone the year? We can debate about it's 2002, because if you add 9 on to 1993, which is a difference in the Pope's calendar. And by the way, this is the Pope. When you hear folks, they don't know what years. They say anywhere from 8 to 10 years. This is the Pope that everyone is talking about. They say he took anywhere from 8 to 10 years off the calendar for himself. This is the guy they're talking about, Pope Gregory XIII, an Italian. And he did this supposedly under the guise to include Easter, a pagan holiday. All right? But what has that to do with the Islamic countries? We still have to touch base on how is it in the Islamic countries, and listen carefully, my Muslim brothers and sisters here in America. I am not beating up on you, because the problem did not originate with you. So you need to understand this. So don't get upset and take offense at and feel that I'm attacking Islam. I got all of my data that will verify what I'm saying. Well, let me go back to this brother I was studying Hebrew under for 2 years ago. He has this big portrait. It's like a book of icons, but it's not called an icon. And in this book, it showed 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, right on up into the 19th century. It showed these sheikhs, these sultans, and all these various folks that we may have heard of and others we may not have heard of. They're all Masons, man. They're all Masons. And what lodge do they belong to in the so-called Middle East, not to mention so-called North Africa? They belong to the Grand Orient Lodge. Who did they report to? Huh? The French superintendent in France. All right? Now, when I first saw that, I said, no, this can't be right. But then again, how are you going to escape seeing these sheikhs and sultans and all these so-called learned men in the world of Islam from the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century? Full color portraits in their full regalia. Either they're not wearing a kufi, but they're wearing some form of turban. They're wearing something traditional from their country with their sash, with all of the various medals that they have been decorated with from their French or their European companions who they pretended to be at war with at the same time. Obviously, there's a game going on here. So these folks, it'll be interesting to find out what happened in history in Islamic countries to see if, in fact, riots took place in Islamic countries. Well, I'm trying my best to find out as much information as I possibly can, because something is clearly wrong. When y'all go out to that masjid and y'all saying it is Friday, let me illustrate to you how you fix the problem if you do not have a calendar that said 2002 in front of you. Let's understand one thing. July 29th is still July 29th. But it's not on the day of the week that they're telling you it is now. For what the white man calls, or the European calls, Thursday, in reality, is Monday. Wednesday, what he calls Wednesday is Sunday. What he calls Tuesday is Saturday. Now, that sounds confusing to follow. Remember this. Hold up your 4 fingers and start with, you're going to count back 4. And what you're going to do is, you're going to start with the day that he's calling it today. So since today, suppose July 29th, and he says today's Thursday, you hold up 4 fingers and you start with, you say Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. Tells you what day of the week it is. And for those of you who may read the ancient literature and works left by Solomon, Solomon sets forth the colors of the days of the week. Now, those of you who are Muslim, you would remember that one of the favorite colors of Prophet Muhammad is green. But what day did he wear that on? Think about it. What day did he wear green on? It should have been Friday. That is the color for Friday. See, what we need to stop doing is stop making Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, look goofy, man. We need to stop that. We need to stop making him look like he's got thumbs on all limbs and 2 left feet and painting him out to be a barbarian. Or the first thing we want to say is he was unlearned. The Quran said he was unlettered. All right? Unlearned and unlettered is 2 different things. Unlettered is what? He didn't write. Unlearned, that's a whole different ballgame when you talk about unlearned. How many of you brothers out there go to meditate? Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that's what he did. That's what he did, and some of his early companions. I don't see none of you brothers out there, or I don't hear any of you brothers discussing meditation. You don't know anything of the higher level. You don't know nothing about Prophet Muhammad calling on the higher forces by the permission of Allah in that battle that he fought. And he was initially losing, and then he figured out what it was he was doing wrong. He followed the same mindset, the same mode that Moses and them did. And you know what they refer to Moses as? Solomon as, peace be upon them all, as Magus. See, but you allowed the Arabs, you allowed the folks to mistranslate the Quran and give you the wrong concepts about what these words really mean. So when Allah uses the word in the Quran, Allah knows exactly what he's talking about and what idea he wishes to convey to us. Magus do not mean magic. You need to understand that. American Indians who are also descendants of the tribe of Israel. Their chiefs or their high priest was known as Archai Magus. What does that mean? Divine Magus. Divine people with power who could do things. And we're not talking witchcraft. Allah has a whole new other word for that in the Quran. Those folks are outright known as sorcerers, like he tell you about Pharaoh and Pharaoh's priests. They were known as sorcerers, working everything on the left-hand side. A Magus doesn't work stuff on the left-hand side. So you brothers need to realize something. In addition to the calendar being off, we're off on a whole lot of points. And we have a short time to catch up. We have a very short time to catch up. So, to wrap it up with this calendar, just remember, add 9 years and hold up your 4 fingers and count back 4 days to get what the correct day of the week is. And start with the day that you are presently at right now. And just say Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. And then look at the color that folks are wearing. Friday, what this European calls Monday, is the day of Yom Al-Jum'ah. Check it out. Black folks don't want to do nothing on that day. They're either wearing something with green in it or white. Check them out. Solomon left that down. See, but a lot of you brothers, you're fighting so hard. You don't want to read the revelations or the communications that Allah sent before. Because if you did, you'd be able to get your butt out of hot water. You wouldn't be walking around this confused. You wouldn't be walking around waiting to see who's going to come from overseas to so-called enlighten you and to set the record straight. You got close to 1 billion Muslims in the world worshiping on the wrong day of the week that they think is Yom Al-Jum'ah. What are they going to do about it? I know what me and the other brothers are doing about it. We're holding Jumu'ah on the correct day. Allah has left a lot of signs for us to pay attention to. This is not about making salat any old kind of way we want to. This is not about introducing anything strange, foreign, or new in. We're not chanting anything strange. We don't have seance. We don't get into any of that. We do it the way it's supposed to be done, which is the way that you're doing it, but you're doing it on the wrong day. And I just hope that you don't start arguing and debating about this with no facts, because the problem that we're facing right now as Muslims in America is we open our mouths too much and argue with brothers who would walk in with a hand truck with all of his data stacked up. And you got no proof. And I'm talking to you imams. I'm talking to you assistant imams. And I'm talking to you brothers who's under the spell of your muftis. Y'all say to us, we can't understand what's in the Quran. Let me tell you something. And I don't want you to remember this. This is in the Quran. Surely Allah says that He knows the full meaning of the Quran. That is correct. Allah always speaks the truth. He knows what He's talking about. He also says in the Quran that those who understand the communications or the Quran that He sent down are those who are learned and those who study. So you brothers who don't know enough and still wet behind the ears, y'all better be careful about when you approach brothers like us, because we are studying. We got the Quran on computer and Arabic. We got it in the English. We got the Old Testament, New Testament. We got the Hebrew. We got the Greek. We're sitting now studying. We're studying the ancient languages. We're going and reading books that they never translated into English. We're doing it, man, while you guys are still fussing and fighting amongst yourselves and trying to argue with us. I don't know how many times I've shown up in various different places and I carry my big knapsack around and I've got all my facts in there. And I whip it out and show it. Oh, no, brother, this must be some figment of imagination. This is an attack on Islam. Listen, Allah tells you clearly in Quran that there's a masjid, or those folks who warred with the Prophet, established a masjid built on mischief and infidelity. And the law says you're not to stand forth in these places. I don't see any of y'all addressing that, man. These guys getting off the boats with his head wrapped. Oh, I love the way he's got that turban wrapped. And right away, he's the guy. He's it. He's it. What about yourself, man? Allah keeps warning, he's warning us in the Quran, man. Not to take our leaders, our imams, and our scholars as lords besides him. And we're doing it. The things that he said not to do, we're doing it. And what do? We argue amongst ourselves about this. Well, quite frankly, I'm tired of arguing. Now, I'm not going to argue with any brother who doesn't study. I'm not. I only deal with brothers who bring their facts. And so far, the facts that we've been bringing when we meet amongst ourselves, it's correlating, man. It's correlating. Brothers coming from Georgia, Florida, various places. Another group, they may not be Muslim. But a brother is aware of what it is that they're doing and where they got their facts from, and he's checking it out, or a sister is checking it out. This is what we're doing, man. We ain't got time to deal with you simple-minded Muslims, man. We ain't got time for y'all. We just don't. We don't see y'all enhancing your lives. We see y'all deteriorating, man. Every day, something is wrong with you. You got no power. The Islam that's been introduced to you, you have been totally defanged. And you have your Eastern brothers to thank for that. So whether you realize this or not, this is not the first time that Islam has been in America. And do not give credit to the Arabs. The Iroquois Indian nation introduced Islam to America. The Cherokee nation. We had the Quran in the Cherokee dialect, man. And I'm still studying the Cherokee dialect myself. We had the Old Testament, the real New Testament, which you call the Injil. No writings of Paul is included in that. Prophet Isa prophesying Prophet Muhammad by name coming, when he was going to come, what he was going to do, who was going to follow him, who wasn't going to follow him. Not by Ahmed, not some obscure name. And it's not translated out of the Greek. I know at least 5 brothers with the real Bible. A book that folks got killed. 18 million folks in Europe lost their lives over, who are black folks who lost their lives over having the real book. Here it was, we had Islam over here. We had it here. But they're not going to tell you that in any of the books. You have to go to the Library of Congress, man, and spend hours and days looking up this information. They're not going to tell you that Benjamin Banneker's name is Emmanuel Mu Ali. They're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you he was a Muslim. They're not going to tell you that he's the one who designed the whole setup, the 12 gates that leads into the White House, and is based on the fact, based on the number 12, children of Israel. They're not going to tell you that. You know what? They shouldn't have to tell you that. It's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's my responsibility. And I'm taking that responsibility. And all I'm trying to do is for those of us who don't have ample time because we have to work this 9 to 5, we have to do a host of other things, for those who can appreciate the information that I'm bringing, then this is for you.